Online dating, danger and instability. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Online dating is big business. Whether it's Match, Bumble, OkCupid, Zoosk, Tinder, or Hinge, there's plenty of places that you can find romance. Nevertheless, as I've explained in my excellent video, Why You Should Not Use Online Dating, it is fraught with danger, particularly for those of you who are of the empathic persuasion. I've made it very clear that online dating is a hunting ground for my kind, and the companies that run these dating sites are only interested in one thing: money. There are repeated horror stories of what occurs as a consequence of people meeting. Sure, there will be some success stories, there invariably are, but believe me, they're significantly outweighed by the horror stories, because it really is like shooting fish in a barrel for our kind, having the capacity to pluck prey from the internet in this manner. Once again, the problems that arise with online dating are brought to the fore in an article by Rhys Blakely, who is the science correspondent for the Times newspaper. But it doesn't particularly highlight precisely why this is. Nearly a century ago, Mr. Blakely writes, James Bossard observed that most married couples met while living in the same neighbourhoods. Cupid may have wings, but apparently they are not adapted for long flights, the sociologist concluded. Now, nearly a century ago, people were less mobile than they are now. But one of the advantages, of course, of meeting somebody from your neighbourhood is that not only were you likely to know them, you could see them, you could smell them, you could see the way that they moved, you were able to talk to them and listen to them, but also invariably you knew plenty about who they were. You may have heard about them before you met them, both good and bad. You could also find out more about them. You could see who their friends were, who their family were, where they worked, perhaps where the places that they frequented. And thus you were able to get a far more accurate picture of who this person was, rather than the anonymous individual that turns up as a consequence of you swiping one way or another. Mr. Blakely continues by explaining that since then, the business of finding a mate has been transformed by dating apps and websites. These matchmaking services have brought together couples who might otherwise never have laid eyes on each other. But a new study suggests that they have also resulted, on average, in less stable marriages. The research involved a sample of 923 American adults, about half of whom had met their spouse via online dating, who were asked to fill in questionnaires. The results could be split into two parts. First, we found that the people who met through online dating tended to be younger, to have more dating experience, and to have married more recently. They were also more likely to be in a same-sex or an interracial marriage, said Liesl Sharabi of Arizona State University, who led the study. There were also differences in the average quality of their marriages as assessed by the subjects themselves. Online daters reported less satisfying and stable marriages than those who met their spouse offline, Sharabi said. That's not to say that their marriages were bad. Online daters still reported relatively high-quality marriages on average. They were just lower relative to offline daters. This online dating effect was modest, but Sharabi argued that it was worth scrutinizing because of the growing number of relationships that start on dating sites and apps, especially since many of those services promise better outcomes than more traditional ways of meeting. Naturally, of course, issuing such a promise is likely to draw certain people in who would think, why not? Not only is it convenient and fast, but apparently it's a better outcome than to dating in a conventional way. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, about 22% of British couples met in the pub, but according to a study by Imperial College London, this figure had fallen to just 7% by 2019. People aged 18 to 35 were fueling this change, with 23% of their relationships starting online. Among those aged between 18 and 35, online dating came ahead of other methods of finding a significant other, including meeting at work, 20%, or via a mutual friend, 19%. The Imperial College research found that many British people believe that online dating allowed for better matches, with 46% agreeing that it made it easier to find someone compatible. Of course, what it fails to take into account is that my kind will regularly lie about what we are, and therefore the matches that will be occurring aren't genuine ones. In the new study, the average marriage stability score for online daters was 3.09, and for offline daters it was 3.52. This was on a 4-point scale where higher scores indicated more stability. The average satisfaction score for online daters was 3.91, and for offline daters it was 4.12, on a 5-point scale with higher scores indicating greater satisfaction. The results were something of a surprise, Sharabi said. Not a surprise to me. 10 years ago, another study found an effect in the opposite direction, with online daters reporting slightly higher quality marriages. However, that was in a pre-dating app era. The online dating landscape has completely transformed over the past decade, thanks to dating apps, she said. In the paper published in the journal Computers in Human Behavior, Sharabi and her colleagues consider possible explanations. She suspects that it is partly a matter of society still looking down on relationships that start on apps. In our study, we showed that there's still a stigma surrounding online dating that can put added stress on a relationship, she said. Dating apps are often labelled as being non-serious or hookup orientated, which can make couples feel a sense of disapproval. Geography may also play a part. In his study, which was published in 1932, Bossard looked at 5,000 marriage licenses in Chicago. 1/3 of the couples had lived less than 5 blocks away from each other when they were still single. The number of marriages steadily decreased as the distances between potential couples increased. He concluded that residential propinquity boosted the chances of matrimony. The new research suggests that it might still play a part. One possibility is that marriages that rely on one party relocating tend to be less stable. It's noteworthy that in this study, people who met through online dating were more likely to be long distance, Sharabi said. She added, "Don't delete the apps just yet. The people who met through online dating still had high-quality marriages on average. Based on these results, we have more work to do to educate people about online dating and to encourage greater acceptance of these relationships at a societal level." Makes one wonder if this was actually sponsored by the apps themselves to try and make them seem like a more credible alternative, given that the reason that was focused upon was the online dating effect of saying that there's still a stigma associated with it. What it fails to have considered is the individuals concerned, and has failed to consider the fact that with online dating there are 2 main issues. One, as I've explained, is a hunting ground for my kind, which naturally leads to relationships which are less stable. And then amongst those who are involved with a non-narcissist, they're not getting to know a person in the traditional sense. And even that individual may misrepresent, not because they're driven by the prime aims, but simply because they want to portray a better account of themselves, leading to potential disappointment. The person is known in more of a vacuum than compared to getting to know them through the traditional route. It seems to me that these researchers have missed out on 2 fundamental reasons as to why this instability comes, and why it remains the case that you really ought to avoid online dating, because, even as this study shows, it results in less stable relationships, and you all know why that is. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.